stunning news in the quest for the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh as the next Supreme Court Justice. And that is, we now have a name of the accuser that claims that she was assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh when they were in high school. Her name is Christine Blasey Ford. She is a Palo Alto, she's a professor in Palo Alto, and she went into great detail in a letter that was published in the Washington Post yesterday afternoon, for truly putting this vote in doubt.
And here's the headline from the Washington Post yesterday afternoon. California professor, writer of confidential Brett Kavanaugh letter, speaks out about her allegation of sexual assault. She apparently contacted this woman, Christine Blasey Ford, contacted the Washington Post back in July when Kavanaugh was first named. Being on the short list, it looked like he was going to replace Kennedy. Then she also contacted the Democrat congresswoman from her district, Anna Eshoo, who sent a letter to Dianne Feinstein. They knew about it since July, and one of the things I saw said that Feinstein sat on the letter. I think this is the Washington Post article. Feinstein sat on the letter citing a request for privacy for the woman. She wanted people to know that there was this allegation, but she did not want her name attached to it.
That's right. Well, Feinstein never asked her about it in the hearings, and Kavanaugh is categorically and unequivocally denying the allegation. She wrote in the letter that a friend was with Kavanaugh when this happened more than 30 years ago, that they were stumbling drunk, and that Kavanaugh pinned her on the bed and tried to attack her and take her clothes off. Well, the friend, his name is Mark Judge. He's a classmate from Georgetown Prep School. They went to high school together. And the friend, Mr. Judge, says that is absolutely nuts. He never saw Brett Kavanaugh act that way, that he was a brilliant student. He loves sports and not into anything crazy or illegal. And then 65 women have come forward. They wrote a letter. Chuck Grassley published this letter, and he said 65 women knew Brett Kavanaugh in high school, and they said, quote, through the more than 35 years we've known him, Brett has stood out for his friendship, character, and integrity.
So they're going to have a couple of votes. First, they were going to break the filibuster, means you got to have a simple majority. Then they were going to have a committee vote, and then it was going to go to the general Senate population, and they were supposed to, with Collins and Murkowski on board, was supposed to get the majority, and he was supposed to sit on the bench. Now you have some Republicans coming out, like Senator, you can guess it, Jeff Flake, saying, I need to hear from her first. Lindsey Graham says, fine, that's a good idea. Let's hear from her, but let's do this quickly. Let's get this, let's find out what the truth is, but let's still have the vote, and let's keep everything on schedule.
So it sounds like Chuck Grassley is trying to arrange for some sort of a call with this particular Ms. Ford. Chuck Schumer has said we got to put off the vote. Keep in mind, folks, the vote is supposed to happen still on schedule for Thursday. But Chuck Schumer says this. He says to railroad a vote now would be an insult to the women of America and the integrity of the Supreme Court as well. And then you've got Lindsey Graham, who said this. If Ms. Ford wishes to provide information to the committee, I would gladly listen to what she has to say and compare that against all other information we have received about Judge Kavanaugh. So the big question is, what happens now? Will there be a vote on Thursday? Will she wind up coming and speaking before the committee? We don't know yet.
Timing's fascinating. I mean, out of everything that came out, you had all these hearings. We were covering it live. Every network was covering it live, nonstop, 6 FBI investigations. And then the letter comes forward, and then the name comes out all in one day.
Yeah, this woman, she's a Democrat. She's a professor in California, and she didn't want her name out there. And her attorney was saying, you know, it's not going to change the vote. I don't know if you want all of the scrutiny. And she decided she didn't. But then it was leaked out, and now she's trying to defend herself. And that's why it's now public, her name at least.
The news, stunning news that came across, so we've been hearing about for the last few days, but now we have a name behind the accusation. Let's bring in Judge Andrew Napolitano, Fox News senior judicial analyst, on the phone last night after Christine Blasey Ford came forward as the professor, the woman, the accuser, behind Brett Kavanaugh, who claims in high school she was assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh and a classmate. So we go back to the 1980s for this. We had an anonymous accuser. Dianne Feinstein found out about this in July. Then we hear about it a couple of days ago, and now we have a name. What does it mean for his nomination?
So Steve Hilton, they asked me last night, how does law enforcement view this? Law enforcement would view it very, very skeptically, because of the passage of time.
35 years.
35 years. So all statutes of limitations, civil and criminal, both statutes of limitations have obviously expired. Memories fade. her ability to recall details obviously will be diminished with the passage of time. But because we are in this era, the post-Robert Bork, post-Clarence Thomas era of Supreme Court hearings before the Judiciary Committee.
And Me Too.
Yes, and we're in the Me Too era. I think that this Dr. Ford will be asked to testify, and Judge Kavanaugh will be asked to testify, and we're going to see another version of the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings right before our eyes sometime in the next few weeks, maybe as soon as Thursday. So the Senate Judiciary Committee will have to decide, is she credible? Is Judge Kavanaugh's denial credible? Is this some sort of a political stunt, some sort of a political Hail Mary from the left? Or did this actually happen as she says it did? Did she have a repressed memory, as she says she has, until she was in counseling with her husband in 2012? Now, the counseling with her husband in 2012 is corroborated by the psychiatrist or psychologist with whom she and her husband were having the counseling.
Although that psychiatrist wrote in her notes that there were 4 men there present. The woman says, actually, that's not true. There were 4 people at the party. There were only 2 in the room with me. The friend that was in the room, the friend that she says jumped on top of them.
He's denied it
slid off
emphatically.
Yeah, he's denying it.
This is what happens when events like this are brought to the fore 35 years later. Memories are different, and people remember, memories fade, and people remember things differently. 2 people seeing the same thing at the same time will recall it differently the next day, much less 35 years later.
According to the Washington Post, which broke this story yesterday afternoon with the name, this woman, Christine Blasey Ford, contacted them through a tip line and told her story, and then wanted to come out because Kavanaugh had been named to the shortlist. And then she contacted her Democratic congresswoman, and then she sent a letter to Dianne Feinstein, who, knew this story back in July. And so people are going, well, why wouldn't she tell people about the story back in July?
You know, there's 2 arguments here. One is, as I said, this is a Democratic Party, capital D, left-wing Hail Mary effort to block an otherwise qualified nominee who the Democrats fear will interfere with Roe versus Wade. The other is Senator Feinstein did the right thing. She did not reveal the existence of this because Dr. Ford didn't want it revealed until...
Wanted her privacy.
Correct. Until something happened in the past week or so. I think it was a website somehow got a hold of this and revealed it, and then Senator Feinstein...
Yeah, reporters started knocking on her door.
Right. Senator Feinstein decided, I got to show this to Senator Grassley, and I got to show this to other members of the committee. The committee's stamp of approval is not required in order for the Kavanaugh nomination to go to the floor. So if Senator Graham and Senator Flake, who have expressed a wish to hear more about this before the vote on Thursday, were to vote against the nominee because they are undecided over this latest allegation, that would not prevent the full Senate from taking...
So it doesn't have to be passed by the committee.
Correct.
It could go just directly to the full Senate.
Unlike a lot of legislation, which has to have the imprimatur of a committee, a nomination to the Supreme Court does not.
We have 51-49, right?
That's a problem.
51-49. So if you lose, even if it gets out of committee, even though it loses in committee, if Jeff Flake says no, Lisa and Senator Collins says, I'm going to wait to see what's going on here. Murkowski was going to wait to see what's going to go on here. Lindsey Graham's going to wait to see. Bob Corker's going to wait to see. Then it looks like they don't have the votes.
Then Mitch McConnell has to go to the Democrats, who are running for re-election in states that the president carried handily in 2016, and ask them if they want to do it. But the more Republicans that start to say no, the more difficult that job will, or maybe, right, Brian, the more difficult that job will be for Mitch McConnell.
What do you think?
I also have to say this. Judge Kavanaugh has had 6 full-fledged FBI investigations. 4 for his time in the Bush White House, for his job, and each time he got a higher level of security clearance. 1 for the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, on which he sits now, second highest court in the land, and 1 for his nomination for the Supreme Court. This didn't come out at all. I have had 2 of these. I know how thorough they are. I couldn't believe the stuff they found out about me. So it is hard for me to believe that this thing, as monumental as it sounds, never was found by the FBI.
But the accuser says she never told anybody about it.
I guess she kept it to herself, or had some mental block, just
Judge,
didn't want to think about it.
What happens? How is she able to prove it? It's been so long. It doesn't sound like she went.
Just like when Anita Hill made those allegations against then Judge, now Justice Thomas. This is a classic he said, she said. So she'll come before the Senate Judiciary Committee. She'll make these allegations. The Democrats will throw her softballs. The Republicans will grill her and cross-examine her.
Not really, because the Republicans have to be smart about it. We're in a different time now.
We are.
So, I mean, you got to be deferential to the accuser always. That makes sense.
You also
but
have
now
to,
more than ever.
But you have to challenge her ability to recall, and you have to point out inconsistencies in the story.
Right. But do you see that this also plays into the general election? So
yes.
if the Republicans come out
ham-handed? I also see that this is a vastly different time period with different social mores than the time that Anita Hill made her allegations against Justice Thomas.
Right. 65 women who knew him in high school have also penned a letter saying that he was an upstanding guy.
And lastly, Senator Grassley has come out and said, I'm setting up phone calls.
I don't think
them.
that's going to work, Brian.
No.
I don't think you can assess the credibility of a person who comes out of the blue with an allegation of this magnitude on the basis of a voice on the phone.
So the chances of a vote on Thursday?
Well, I think there's chances of a hearing on Thursday and perhaps a vote when the hearing is over.
All right. Judge, thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Thanks,
guys.
Judge.